Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Dave Burns. I'm the Story Center Publication Manager, and we are here with author Steve Daly and Angie Strathman from Mid-Continent Public Library. We're going to do an interview with the author and get to know a little bit more about his work. Much like we did last time with the book launch, please feel free to chat in any questions you have. We're going to do a Q&A at the end with the author. So we'd love to hear the questions you have and just engage with us however you'd like. So I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Angie. And again, thank you so much for being here.
All right, Dave, thank you for that introduction. And Steve, I'm happy to have you join us today for this interview to hear more about your book and about the writing process and your career as well. So if you want to maybe just give a quick introduction about your background and what you brought to this book.
Okay. Yes, I have worked almost all my adult life as a psychologist. I started out in the field of developmental disabilities, working with a lot of children with mental retardation, learning disabilities, etc. And then I worked on an adolescent unit, Children's Psychiatric Hospital in St. Joe. And then I came to the Kansas City area and worked for our Tri-County Community Mental Health Center when it was located in North Kansas City. And then I have been in private practice for the past 10 years. So I enjoy working with people, and I also enjoy writing.
Okay. Well, what first drew you to psychology as far as a career?
Well, that's kind of interesting. I can remember my junior year of high school, kind of deciding and talking about wanting to be a psychologist. And I really feel that part of the thing that drew me to this was my mom had a lot of interest in medical things. We watched a lot of medical television shows, but she also liked a person that was a missionary, that was a doctor that had gone over to Vietnam, and I had read some of his books, and I just felt a desire to want to help other people.
Well, that definitely comes across in your book and in your writing. You mentioned that you're also a writer and specifically a poet. How long have you been writing poetry?
Well, I know that it started probably in school as assignments when I was in grade school. But I think my real interest probably came after I moved to the Kansas City area. I think a lot of the poems that I've written for clients started when I was working at Tri-County Community Mental Health Services back then. Mm-hmm. And I not only write poetry, but I also write a lot of educational handouts. And I just found that sometimes sharing poetry with my clients made an impression on them and helped them to remember things that they may not have remembered if it was just an educational handout.
Yeah. What is it, do you think, that makes the form of poetry a little bit easier for those concepts, a little bit more understandable for your clients or for readers in general?
Well, I think the biggest part is that poetry, I think, touches the person's emotions more. And instead of just being all intellectual, it touches the heart. And when we touch the heart, then we're more likely to remember things.
I think that definitely comes across in the poems that I read too. How did your clients respond to when you first started sharing your poetry?
Well, I can't remember the very first ones, but I can remember when I started writing it and giving it to people that a number of people said that it really was helpful. On Angel's Wings is about grief, and I've had several clients that have lost loved ones, and one of them had lost a granddaughter and had that poem in the funeral information, for people to read and stuff. So.
Mm-hmm. Do you write poetry besides the poetry you share for your clients?
Well, I have. I know that I wrote some poetry when I was dating my wife and stuff, and not all of it is something that I've shared with clients.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, Dave and I were just discussing earlier that we think one of the great things about your particular book is that you not only have the poems themselves, but you also have reflection questions and journaling prompts to help people engage with the poems even more. So how did you just first decide on that structure? And you want to talk a little bit more about kind of the extras that are included besides the poems in your book?
Sure. Well, I decided I wanted to do something with my poetry.
Mm-hmm.
And, looking at, I selected around 30 to 35 poems, and I ended up with 35 poems that I have selected. And I didn't think 35 poems was enough for a book. So I thought, hey, what if I could, make this into a workbook? So I thought of just having some prompting questions to ponder, to make people kind of think. And then I wanted to share my reflections as an author. How did I use that poetry maybe with clients? What did that poetry mean to me? What prompted me to maybe write that particular poem? And then I am also a big believer in the power of writing. And for a lot of clients doing narrative therapy or writing, maybe they lost a loved one and they weren't able to tell their father something they wanted to tell them. So I will have them write a no-send letter to express what they would have liked to have told their father, just write to their father. And oftentimes they would share that with me, and we would kind of talk about that in therapy. So the writing to heal, to grow and heal is the part where a person actively kind of engages the writing process.
Well, I think that it was a really great addition to the book, because I think for some people, you mentioned how poetry was something that connects to people's emotions, but poetry can also be intimidating for some readers, and you really help people engage with the poems in this way too. So I really enjoyed that structure. So one of the poems in particular that I enjoyed was the poem Bobbers and Sinkers, which you described the two different kinds of people that you to spend time with or to have in your life. Can you just describe a little bit who bobbers and sinkers are?
Okay, bobbers are persons that lift us up. They're positive people, people that encourage, people that we want to be around. And sinkers are people that are very negative, that talk and complain and blame and criticize. And the purpose of the poem for clients is that there are a lot of people that are maybe in a family situation or a work situation where there's a lot of negativity. And if they don't spend more time around positive people, it's going to drag them down. It's going to intensify their depression. It's going to make things worse. So this is a poem that kind of says, hey, we don't have to eliminate sinkers from our life, but we need to have bobbers to pull us up. And oftentimes, if a person is trying to please a parent or a family member that cannot be pleased, it would be much better that they use that energy to make friends and spend time on people that do care and that will be a positive friend to that person.
Well, you don't have to mention by name. Who are the kinds of bobbers in your life?
Well, okay. Well, there's a lot of family members. I have 2 kids, grandchildren that are certainly bobbers. A lot of my colleagues are really positive people that I work with, so they are bobbers. And I think some of the people that I've met through writing, the writers' meetings and stuff, certainly some of them are bobbers. There are people in my church that are bobbers. So there are a lot of bobbers out there.
Okay.
Fortunately, yes.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you have so many of them in your life. So obviously this metaphor comes from fishing, which is something that you enjoy besides your work and writing. What are some of your other interests outside of those things?
Well, I love photography. I really like nature photography. So when we go to a national park or someplace like Rocky Mountain National Park, I love to hike and take photos and then have maybe the very best blown up. And, I have several of those on my wall in my office. So I like photography. I enjoy playing racquetball. I've talking about fishing. I've gone to Canada like 4 times on fishing trips and have just really enjoyed it up there. I like to go to Merrimack Springs, which is a park that has a trout park in Missouri, close to my hometown, and go trout fishing. There's a pond, kind of a small lake in our subdivision, and some evenings I will just go over there, take a lawn chair, and fish for relaxation. So,
Listening. I like that you were able to incorporate that into your poem too. To me, one of your most powerful poems was Choose Life. And I particularly pulled out the line, although you believe your heart to be broken beyond repair, I can see it has just been stretched to make room for healing. And I really thought that was a powerful line. But this poem also has a personal connection for you. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you came to write this poem?
yes. My sister that's closest to me in age, she has lost one daughter, and then she has also lost 2 granddaughters to suicide. And the poem was actually written. I wrote it after the last granddaughter had committed suicide, and had kind of shared that. And for me, I understand that it's very difficult for people who have not been deeply depressed to, why would a person want to commit suicide? But, sometimes there are genetic factors, there are things that go on in a person's mind, and it's often during times of stress where they feel worthless, or they feel extreme guilt, or they feel like no one cares. And it's so easy to get caught up in these thoughts that are not at all based on reality, but are based on what a person feels. And the poem is to really encourage people to both be, people that have relatives or friends that may be suicidal, to be supportive, but also to kind of say to the person that has suicidal tendencies and feelings that there will be a better day, that this pain and this misery is not going to last forever.
Wonderful. Another poem that really kind of struck me and just made me think a little bit, it was Too Often I Choose Fear. And in that one, you say, each day in our life, we have choices to make where we pick either fear or love. And I thought that was really thought-provoking that you're juxtaposing those two choices. So why do you think we're choosing between fear and love?
Okay. Well, first, I'd like to kind of give credit to where that idea came from.
Okay.
And Jerry Jampolsky is a psychiatrist, and he had a spiritual awakening later in his life, and he started the Foundation for Attitudinal Healing. And his most popular book was Love is Letting Go of Fear. So that is where I became familiar with that concept. But in his belief is that love and fear are the 2 most powerful emotions in our life. And so often I think it is easy to choose fear, to avoid doing things that would help us to grow, to become a better person, to reach out, to build relationships. So that's kind of where that idea came from.
Well, we are, of course, Well, one question that I asked, these are especially great. I found for me that these are, kind of trying times for all of us for lots of reasons right now. And so it was really wonderful to read your particular book and your poems during this time. Are there any, and you mentioned that the Jerry Jablonski was an author that was meaningful to you. I hope I got that right again.
It's close enough.
Okay. But what other, is there any other poets or writers that you particularly turn to or that have inspired you?
Well, talking about the times, I just recently wrote a post about radical compassion. Mm-hmm. And some of the writings of the Dalai Lama is something that has touched me. But of all the speeches I've ever heard, the Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech is the one that I think is the most powerful speech I can ever think of. And it has, really, really moved me. And, I left just I quoted one paragraph that I thought was most moving from that speech and put that. And Radical Compassion is not a poem, but let me think. Let me just kind of read it. It's not exactly a poem. I wouldn't consider it a poem, but it's kind of talks about what radical compassion is. So let me just read this. Compassion flows from the heart and mind and is a genuine desire to extend caring to another. It is easy to have compassion for an injured puppy that is whimpering in pain. Most would be quick to comfort a young child who has fallen and skinned a knee. We usually care about family members and close friends when they suffer a loss or experience a severe illness. Compassion often drives us to help another in need. Yet there are times when it is most difficult to experience and show compassion. Radical compassion is the ability to experience genuine caring for someone who dislikes us and wants to hurt us. It is a desire for good things to happen to someone who has deeply hurt us. Radical compassion may come from understanding that those who attack us often do so out of their own fear and prejudice. It is easier to have compassion for the victim than the abuser until we understand that the abuser is often a victim as well. Often those who are cruel have been treated with cruelty in childhood. That does not justify what they do, but understanding what led to the cruelty may make it easier to have compassion for them. Radical compassion may stop a vicious cycle of ongoing revenge. Radical compassion may heal the hatred and anger within your heart. Radical compassion can help us to be less defensive toward others who are in power that we fear. Radical compassion does not mean we submit to abuse or injustice, but it does mean that we will not inflict that abuse on others. Radical compassion frees us from the power we give others over us when we become locked into a battle of vindictiveness. So, I just am a believer in the power of forgiveness. And I think forgiveness is something that we really do more for ourselves than for the other person. And when people, if it's hatred because of prejudice, racial prejudice, or whatever it is, the person who holds on to that hatred, that is harming them, is like a poison in their body.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned that's a blog post on your website, and your website, which Dave is bringing up that blog post right now, where you can, if you're moved by that like I was, you're able to go back and read that for yourself. But there are other really wonderful resources that are available on your website, both for readers of your book, but also just in general. Do you want to talk a little bit about what's available on your website?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. First, there are blogs, and since I started this website, this is the 19th blog that I put on there, and I try to do them weekly. I've been running a little slow the past couple weeks, but I will try to get back on a weekly schedule. And then at the top, there is also a area that is called downloads, and if Dave can point to that. And all of the poems that are in Healing the Heart and Mind are on these PDFs, at the top. And a person can download those poems, and if they have like a hardback version or they have a library version of the book, there's also a place for fillable PDFs where they can actually write in the writing to grow and heal part, or journaling to grow and heal. So all of that is available. And then there's one other section that I started more recently, and it's called self-study. And I think Dave will look at that. And I am writing 10 different effective living skills. Like recent ones have been on listening, assertive communication. The very first one is on breathing exercises to calm the body. But they're really important living skills that I share with many clients. And so you can download the PDF that kind of explains, and it also kind of has a worksheet. And then if you complete that self-study, you can kind of go down and print off a certificate of completion to just be recognized. It doesn't have any value, it doesn't have any academic credit, but it's just something that a person, if they complete the thing on and practice the skills for breathing to calm themselves, then they can write or they can print off a certificate on the breathing skills.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and that website is feelgoodenough.com for those of you who want to access some of those wonderful resources that are available on Steve's website. Speaking of certificates, we are very excited that you are our very first storytelling certification graduate to be published by our own Woodneath Press imprint. How did going through that process help you as you were writing this book or in putting it together?
Okay. It's kind of interesting because I think so many people enjoy the writing aspect, but there are other aspects like getting your book published, marketing the book, and the written certification classes really made me much more aware of the other processes that are important and still things that I am needing to learn more and more about. So I enjoyed a lot of, almost all the classes. I think one of the ones that I enjoyed the most was kind of on branding, and it talked about how it's important, just like a brand name, Pepsi-Cola, has a logo and everything, that authors need to also kind of brand themselves and have something that characterizes what they're doing, what their purpose for writing is. So but all the classes were good, and I've also really enjoyed the writers' meetings and being able to kind of sit down and talk and share with other people that are writers, and the critique group that Norma King has also done. So I'm very, very appreciative that I live in Liberty and have access to these things offered by at Woodneath Library.
Well, and we are very excited to have you on board as one of our authors. And we do want to leave some time for Q&A. So I guess my final question for you is one of a lot of your poems talk about the importance of gratitude in your life. So as a psychologist, first of all, how is gratitude practice beneficial? And then I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to sit down and talk to you in this conversation, but what are you grateful for right now, too?
Well, one of the things I'm grateful for is that my daughter and oldest granddaughter and grandson just visited, and we had a very good time, and we have not really had anyone inside our house before they came, since the COVID-19 stay-at-home orders was in place. So, I'm very grateful for that. I'm just grateful. We have so much, so many things. We have a nice house. I can walk in the neighborhood. I feel safe to walk in the neighborhood. And I know that many people can't say that. So those are things that I'm grateful for. And then as far as the psychologist, there is a field of psychology that instead of studying pathology, depression, anxiety, studies people that really are living their life at its fullest. And a lot of positive psychology studies have been looking at what helps a person to live their life more fully and gratitude. Uh, I took a class by Lynn Johnson, who is a psychologist and a professor on positive psychology. And he talked about a study that showed that if a person who has depression writes a letter to like a mentor, a gratitude letter to someone that was very important in their life, and then shares that letter, hopefully takes the letter with them, talks to the person, kind of surprises them, reads the letter, and then gives them that letter, that on the average, their depression comes down by about 50%. And it's not a lasting thing where, okay, you do one letter and everything's fine. But for almost like a 2-week period, it seems to make a big difference. And in positive psychology, they have also found that people that are depressed, if they write about 3 new things every day that they're grateful for, that over a period of about a month, it starts to help them look and focus more on the positive than the negative. I myself have said that gratitude is a very good antidote to both anxiety and depression, because when we are really thinking of things that we're grateful about, we're not blaming others or worrying about how unfairly we've been treated. We're not focused on the past or worrying about the future. We're thinking more about what's going on and what we have to be grateful for. So.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, I guess this is time for me to thank you for your time and turn it over to Dave to see if there are any questions from our audience.
Well, thank you, Angie, for asking questions and giving me this opportunity to share.
Sure.
All right. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Angie. Really appreciate it. Okay. Well, Steve, that was a wonderful conversation the two of you had. We did have a few people chime in and have some questions and comments. So the first one that came in was asking, what's the difference between your personal reflections and revising to publishing quality of those same reflections? So I think, were there any alterations that happened between your personal reflections and the final published product?
I can't think of any. It's like, I'm sure as I just went through the process of kind of working through the book that, I would read things and I would change things as they went on. But as far as, like when Woodneath Press, when, looking at that, we really didn't make any significant changes to, I think the poems are the reflections, In editing, the person who did the editing found a lot of errors and stuff, typographical errors and grammatical errors, and was able to, correct most of those. So that was helpful. But as far as just the changing the reflections, no, I don't think I changed those.
Yeah, no, we really, I think really what we did was we kind of restructured some things a little bit as far as the order of the poems and put structure in it. But really, most of it it's your words coming through, and that's what I was so glad to see, that you're able to then just put your words out there. So,
yes.
Yeah, so great. Thank you for that. Thanks for that question. Had a few comments. One saying the world needs a lot more radical compassion these days. So, I think your blog post really touched folks. Do you want to talk a little bit about that a little bit more, Steve?
Okay, about the post itself.
Sure. Yeah.
Yes. We've all seen pictures of George Floyd, and it's just a terrible thing, and it's hard to imagine how a person could do that. And I also am very aware of the racial prejudice that has gone on and has gone on for such a long period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And there are things that were common that I didn't even realize were prejudice, and I'm sure that there's probably things that I'm still not aware of. At our church, we did a class, and it was written by a United Methodist minister from Ferguson, Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
And in that class, going through his workbook and stuff, it really pointed out how privileged we are. And that's something that people, if you grew up having a lot and not having to fear and not having people look down on you, then it's very difficult for us to kind of understand what it might be like to be a Afro-American person or a Hispanic person, or in an area where there's prejudice.
Right.
I worked one summer of college in East St. Louis, Missouri, and I was sent out to get lunch, and I went into this place to get the order, and I was the only white person in there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, wow, I had never had that feeling. And yet there are so many people in minorities that face that day in and day out. So, and again, what the blog is about is the need for radical acceptance. When we have compassion, when we try to understand, but it's so easy to just kind of judge immediately and to go by things that other people have said without even giving any thought. And if a person grows up in a home, any home where there's a lot of prejudice, it would be very difficult for that to not become how they think.
Mm-hmm.
And unless they're exposed, and a lot of people, they go to college and they learn that a lot of things that they were taught aren't true because they work side by side with someone that maybe their parents had prejudice against.
Sure. Yeah. Well, just judging by the comments and things that people have made, you sharing that blog post touched a lot of lives. So thank you for doing that, Steve.
Oh, sure.
Thank you for taking the time to chat about that. We do have some. Oh, go ahead. Oh, sorry.
No.
We do have some people saying congratulations again on the certificate, being a certificate graduate in publishing. So, again, always congratulations on that. That's so great. Did have another question. What advice do you have for writers and storytellers to make a positive impact in the world while remaining sensitive to the current social climate? Kind of a loaded question, but a good one.
Well, writers write all types of different things, but I think there are some people that write for entertainment, and we need entertainment. We need murder mysteries. We need things that are going to grab us. Some people write science fiction, but I think the important thing is to be true to oneself and to write what they're really interested in, and to just try to do that, and to also, when you step back, to kind of say, hey, how is this writing going to affect people?
Mm-hmm.
And to just be writing with an awareness that this can have an impact on other people, and I don't want to do something that is going to be hurtful.
Sure, right, and I think that's very smart, and that comes through in your work, because your work is all very uplifting, as Angie was saying, very positive, and it's as we talked before, very timely, I think. And so very proud to have to be a part of this process with you. Going to ask people if they have any other questions to feel free and chime in right now, but I am going to put a link at the very bottom of the screen. This is for our program survey. So if you would be willing to go to mystorycenter.org on the homepage, and about 3 rows down, there's a place where you can fill out a survey and just kind of talk about, share with us your experience with this event and what you'd like to see, and we just love to hear your input on that. Let me put Steve's website up here one last time at the very bottom, feelgoodenough.com, and let's go back and see if we have any other questions or comments that have popped in while we're kind of wrapping things up here.
Okay, one thing I'd like to say just about my website is I would really like people to leave some comments, questions, make suggestions. I need some interaction to motivate me to continue to do things on the website. So there is a place for contact where a person can kind of offer, some comments and stuff. So that would be most appreciative.
Well, you know what?
Most appreciated.
The next question actually kind of ties into that. Someone was asking if you have any other projects in the works. So there you go.
There's a possibility that I might write a book about the self-study that I'm doing now, and so that is something that I've given some thought to, maybe making that into a book. Effective living skills. And then I also have an idea for a book that would deal with writing to heal, helping people to kind of recover from trauma through writing. So those are 2 things. But right now, it's like I'm just, as a psychologist, I've had a lot of changes. I've been doing things from home and teletherapy that I had never done in my life. And now I'm back full time at the office and still doing some teletherapy at the office, but mostly seeing people face to face. And I much enjoy seeing people more face to face than doing this over the internet or telephone. But yes, so.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today. And if I may, Steve, very quickly, just to kind of piggyback, this book we've got is Healing. Here we go, Healing the Heart and Mind. We've got a paperback and hardback, and it's also available in ebook. The poetry in there is glorious, and it's a great uplifting piece. We're also in the process of working on another poetry anthology through Woodneath Press. That information just was released today on our website. So if people are interested in that, they can go to, again, mystorycenter.org. Let me put the banner back up there. Let's go back to mystorycenter.org. And where is it? Here we go. Sorry about that. And find out more information about that poetry project that's popping up. So, Steve, that might be something you're interested in.
I might very well be. That sounds good.
Can-see-based poetry, can-see-based poetry in conjunction with the bicentennial coming up. So we're planning on releasing that next April. So maybe we'll have another poetry book a year from yours.
That would be great.
Yeah. So I think we've covered all the comments that have come in. Steve, thank you so very much for your time today. I really appreciate it. And thanks again for publishing with us. This has been a wonderful experience. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have.
I have.
Great. Well, again, my name is Dave Burns. I'm the Story Center Publication Manager. We've been talking with Woodneath Press author Steve Daly, and Angie Strathman was doing our interview. And thank you both so much for being here. Hope you all have a wonderful evening. And again, thank you, Steve, for being here. Have a great evening.
Okay. Take care. Goodbye.
Goodbye.